Have you ever touched a hot surface and wondered how your body knows to pull your hand away? Well, in this presentation called Too Hot to Handle, we're going to tell you why. And this is by myself, Zach, Tori, Wayne, and Stella. Our body has five senses, which include touch and sight. Our body may have a reflex reaction depending on the strength and type of stimulus presented. The body will activate these reflexes through electrical signals being sent from where the stimuli occurs to the brain. The reflex usually consists of three components: the sensory neuron, the interneuron, and the motor neuron. The sensory neuron is the first one to receive the information when there is a stimulus. Then the information gets relayed to the interneuron, which is usually located in the spinal cord or brain and acts as a bridge between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. Eventually, the information is passed on to the motor neuron, which will innervate the corresponding body parts to do the actual acts. These electrical signals are sent via neurons to the brain or spine cord through axons that pass the signal extremely fast to the brain to be able to react fast to the stimuli. Stimuli is something other than yourself that will cause an effect on your body.
This is our abdominal neuron. It's made of three main functional parts: the dendrite, axon, and axon terminal. And behind the axon terminal, there are these neurotransmitters, which are chemical that can cause firing of other neurons. So the large domino can only be knocked down when enough domino falls onto it at the same time. As soon as the large domino falls, the dominoes at the end will then push the marbles and scatter them around. The marble will then knock down more dominoes of other neurons. In this clip, domino pushing each other symbolize the electrical activity within a neuron. Each dendrite branch takes input from other neurons, and the large domino is triggered only when there's enough input. As dominoes cause the marbles to scatter, it symbolizes the electrical signal changing to chemical signal, causing the release of neurotransmitter. There are several branches of dominoes in front of the large domino. When only one or two fall, they won't have enough force to knock down the large one, as shown in the clip.
Now please watch this video carefully and observe what is happening at the knee and the lower leg. This involuntary kicking motion of the leg that you just saw caused by the sharp tap at the plantar tendon is actually achieved by a reflex called the knee reflex. In fact, it is the shortest reflex within the human body which only involves two neurons to complete, the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. When the reflex hammer gives the plantar tendon a sharp tap and causes the tendon to stretch, the sensory neuron at the tendon gets stimulated and generates an action potential. This action potential travels down along the axon of the sensory neuron as we talked about in the last scene, then gets relayed to the motor neuron by neurotransmitters at the synapses. The motor neuron then carries this information and innervates the corresponding muscle, which is responsible for the actual kicking motion. Although it might sound like a long process, it actually only takes about 13 milliseconds to complete in real life. Also, this reflex does not require the involvement of the brain. Instead, the spinal cord is in charge. Therefore, your knee reflex can complete this motion within a blink without you actually cognitively thinking about doing it. Next, let's take a look at a different scenario that also involves a fundamental reflex. As you can see, the pupil constricts immediately as the flashlight shines directly into the eye. This adjustment of the pupil is achieved by the pupil constriction reflex, which, different from the previous knee reflex, involves three neurons to complete: the sensory neuron, the interneuron, and the motor neuron. As the light shines into the eye, the sensory neuron at the back of the eye detects this overwhelming light beam and send this information to the interneuron, then the motor neuron by action potentials. The motor neuron then innervates the circular muscle around the pupil to contract, which allows the pupil to constrict. Thanks to the pupil constriction reflex, your pupils are always in their optimal sizes for different light conditions, and this is a fundamental feature for you to see the world clearly.
Remember the clip from the beginning of the mug full of hot water? This reaction to pain from heat is called the nociceptive or withdrawal reflex pathway. This reflex consists of the painful stimulus, which is heat, sensory neurons which convey messages from the palm and fingers, the interneuron in the spinal cord, and the motor neuron which controls the contraction in response of the biceps. Instead of your brain causing you to remove your hand from the mug, pain information from the sensory neurons in your hand travels to the spinal cord via an action potential and activates a motor neuron mediated by an interneuron, allowing for contraction of the biceps muscle, which pulls your hand away from the heat source. This is evolutionarily favorable, which means that this reflex functions to increase our ability to survive. Because the spinal reflex is much quicker than one that involves the brain, it allows you to sever contact with the painful stimulus before too much damage is done to your hand. Reflexes are what keep us safe from harmful stimuli, adjusting our bodily responses to prevent damage from excess stretching, light, and heat, exemplified by the knee reflex, the pupil constriction reflex, and the withdrawal reflex.